Madamwhipass, I have another special guest. We're going to just call him Marcellus. Marcellus is such a wonderful individual. And I did an interview last night, as you know, with Jailhouse Productions. And I guess this is going to be a series about the YouTube generation that shut the church down and then left. And Marcellus is a member of that very generation. Again, it's all about a bunch of YouTubers who opened up their platforms just as wide as these mega preachers and down to the street corner pastor, who were making videos full of fallacies, falsifications, manipulations, and all of that. And they opened up their platform, whether it was on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio, and began to dispute and refute everything that was not like God. And so in 2019, we don't see an infestation of wrong teachings coming from preachers like Creflo Dollar and you know the record. We don't see that anymore. Not as much. You know, we, as far as I can see from where I'm standing, you get little drip drops of foolishness. But that generation has left. They're still around. They just don't do videos anymore about it. So I would like to just have a conversation with Marcellus and go back down memory lane at times, and also uh, be informed of what's happening now. So everyone, please welcome Marcellus.
Well, thank you guys for having me. Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully I'll be able to contribute something worthwhile to this conversation.
Hopefully.
And just ask me whatever you like.
Okay, so you were part of that generation that shut down the foolishness of the church. How did you find yourself on such platforms?
Well, to be honest with you, just to give you a little history, in 2005, after working for a mega church, or working with a mega church for about 9 years, there were a lot of things that I started to notice within that ministry and within the church. When I would, look in the Bible and look into what we were doing, it was kind of easy because I started to notice that one of these things was just not like the other. When I looked at the scripture and I looked at what we were doing, I said, this just cannot be what Jesus died for. If Jesus died so that we can have choir robes and, usher boards and, all of this stuff and anniversary meetings and all of this kind of stuff, I said, I just don't think this could possibly be what the Son of God would have gone to the cross for. And so, to tell you the truth, there were some things that happened in the ministry and in the church, and it just really made me start, questioning why we do what we do and why and how we do what we do. And so it began a quest for me to really sort of start asking some hard questions and, dealing with some things from a just a natural standpoint. And in 2005, I decided to just completely walk away from the institutionalized church, not knowing that maybe a year or two later, that I would actually run into some individuals who were just like myself, and we would sort of, strike up a kindred bond and really start to bounce things off that we kind of were feeling in our spirits and our hearts. And we discovered that we were thinking the same thing. We were questioning the same things. We were questioning our questions. And it just led us to to start really taking a deep dive look at how the church was, formed, how the church came to be. And we just started saying, okay, well, maybe we're on to something here. And so we just started asking hard questions where we would see certain things in the church that were being done and that were being said. We addressed issues, and we didn't really address them to hurt the church or to cause people to leave the church. We just wanted to have good conversation and hard conversations that maybe you weren't allowed to ask your pastor and you weren't allowed to ask your spiritual leaders, etc. And so that's what we did. And one little spark, a flame, by the name of Eddie Long, created a a years and years and years of content.
Mm-hmm.
And it sparked from there, and that's where petpreacher.com was born, and the rest is all history.
Wow, wow, wow. That is so amazing. And I don't know, are those shows still up on Blog Talk Radio?
Yeah, you can still listen to those shows. And I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of these new video bloggers on YouTube and some of this stuff that I'm hearing, a lot of these people have gone by and they've listened to those programs, and now they're starting to regurgitate and repeat some of the things that we were saying years ago. And I know they're listening to the shows because some of the things that they're saying is like verbatim stuff that we've already covered. Like we did a series called "From the Plantation to the Pew," where we talked about, the correlation between slavery and the modern church and pew sitting. And I'm now, I'm starting to hear people talk about that. And so, a lot of those things we've already covered. And to be honest with you, I'm very glad that people are having the conversations. Sometimes I get a little upset because I feel like, they're disrespectful to the people who came before them to create those conversations. But nonetheless, they're having the conversation. So those of us who, planted those seeds or whatever, we can kind of take a step back and just, clap our hands and say, go, go, go.
Oh, so, maybe it was a purpose for us to do what we've done and then just left. We left.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Well, I feel like, it had its time, and I feel like we accomplished what we needed to accomplish. And it doesn't necessarily mean that at some point in time we won't come back together again, and have some more hard conversations, because in the fullness of time, things have to be revealed and have to be uncovered, and have to really be dealt with in the manner in which they need to be dealt with. And so I'm happy, that we were able to do what we did, and I'm so thankful to God that we were able to, help as many people as we did. I can't even tell you guys the countless emails and Facebook messages and things that I've gotten over the years saying thank you for, the help that you guys gave me. It was making me think, I was starting to think that I was crazy. And when I heard you guys say this or say that, it made me think, okay, well, maybe I'm okay and I'm not crazy. And so those are the kind of things that I'm grateful to God that we had an opportunity to do. And I know I made a lot of preachers mad. I know that. But it had a purpose, and so I'm just grateful.
Now, your time at Church Folk Revolution, I have a question for you. What was the most memorable show or memorable moment? That situation, that event, that discussion, or maybe something that you heard somebody else say? What is the one thing that stands out on the top of your mind for you that has taken place over there?
Wow, there's so wow. I think the interview with Frank Viola was huge. The interview with Fred Price Jr. was huge. Um, we've had so many interviews. The interview with Joseph Senegal, huge. We've had so many situations, but I think, what really stands out to me and it continues to stand out to me was on one particular, just unbeknownst to me, I was really upset about something and I forget exactly what the situation was, but I just blurted out this little statement and I said, the Catholic Church has had a baby. And, and good night. And I think I hung up the phone after I made my statement, and I just hung up because I was so mad. I was so mad, and that's probably the one thing that stands out to me still to this day because I truly believe that the black church and a lot of what goes on now in the black church is just a watered down version of Catholicism. And it's unfortunate that we don't have people who can articulate that and really give a good voice to that. But we're suffering under the weight of an old wineskin while trying to put new wine in it. It's bursting at its seams. And while people are standing back saying, hey, this just doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. Something is wrong here. We're still pouring wine into something that's breaking under the weight and the pressure of a culture and a society that it really feels like that the wineskin is obsolete. And it's unfortunate that the church is becoming really, in our culture, the most obsolete organization while trying to survive. It's completely obsolete to me, anyway.
Wow, the Catholic Church has had a baby. And every time you
Absolutely.
would say that, we would all fall out. It was like we was just anticipating that phrase to come out of your mouth. Wow, you mentioned some names. Did you say Frank Viola?
Yeah, Frank Viola. He
Who?
was the author of a book entitled Pagan Christianity. We used to refer to it as the red pill because it had a red cover. The book has a red cover. And Frank, who is a Christian, actually went back and started studying the origins of our liturgy and why we do some of the things that we do in this thing that we call church. And Frank so beautifully and eloquently laid out some things in his book that to this day to me are just completely undisputed. They cannot be disputed. And I think that when you run across people like Frank and some others, they cause a really good problem and a huge problem to people who, just want to go with status quo and really don't want to deal with some harsh subjects and ask some really deep questions. So Frank Viola, we love him, and we call him Frankie V. But we love Frank.
Oh wow. I'm gonna have to go back and revisit that show because I remember, and another great aspect of the Church Folk Revolution platform was laughter. We laughed so much. It was so funny and just a wonderful platform to be a part of and to just listen to. And you and I have talked, for a while now about kicking up Church Folk Revolution again. And what do you think about that? What's going on today? Do you yourself feel some sort of pull to bring it back?
Well, you know what I think? I think it's going to come back, but I don't believe it's going to come back in the form that we were originally or familiar with. Um, because I think the types of conversations that we want to have and that we need to have got to have a more mature, they've got to have a more methodical, they've got to have a little bit more thought put into them, and we have to be able to have the types of dialogue with the types of individuals that we need to have it with, without them feeling as if we're going to lambaste them or make them, feel horrible, or et cetera, et cetera. So I think it will come back. I think, but I think when it does reemerge, it's going to be. I look at Church Folk Revolution as the infant. It was the baby. It went through a baby stage. It went through a teenage stage. I think that when it reappears, it's going to be in an adult form and an adult stage. And I think it's going to really bless a whole lot of people. And it's going to change the fate of so much stuff. And let me tell you why I feel that way. I've been sort of stepping back and taking a look at a lot of people who are on social media and on Facebook and how things are being done. And I'll be honest with you, I am amazed at how double-minded and double-faced a lot of this stuff is, and the trickery of a lot of vloggers who claim to be looking out for the good in certain subject matters, but really they have a hidden agenda, and they're trying to prop up certain, pit preachers, and they're trying to, prop up certain individuals. And I think that when it reemerges, it's going to really reemerge as a mature, thought-provoking platform, and we were before, but I think it's going to be at a greater level, and I think people will really appreciate that, and they'll really be able to see, okay, these people aren't as crazy as we might have thought they were.
Wow. Is there a YouTube generation like us or somewhat like us on YouTube? And if so, who do you listen to?
Well, I'll tell you, I heard Ebenard Jordan say something a couple of months ago, about a month ago. I was on my Facebook, and I ran across a video on my timeline where he said that he believes that a lot of these vloggers and bloggers have been called by God to show the church themselves and deal with it. Now, I really believe that he was only saying that because he happens to be friends with a very well-known vlogger who's becoming really known on Facebook. And he's mentoring this person, and I feel like he said that because he's trying to give credence and really give backing to this individual. But if you remember, many moons ago, I told you guys in the Church Folk Revolution that God was raising us up and using our voice. And he had been using our voice from years ago. Now, people didn't like our voice because our voice was confrontational. Our voice was telling you, what you were doing, and it wasn't right. And we said it how we wanted to say it, and we didn't care what you thought about it. And so I kind of feel like, that's kind of an element that is going to continue. I kind of feel like God is going to continue to raise our voices, and it's undeniable. The mark that we've made is undeniable. It is it's without question. And I'm grateful that the seeds were sown that other people can now come behind and say, oh yeah, we're going to carry this forward, and we're going to have these conversations. But the conversation started, on preacher.com street, and now it's just moved over several blocks to some other platforms. But it started there, and the wildfire is just spreading. That's all.
Wow. So who do you listen to?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't really listen to anyone anymore. I've been in a period where I'm kind of on the backside of the mountain, trying to really pray and hear what the next move is going to be. And I've been sort of silent. That's why people haven't heard anything from me, It's not that that I don't deal with these issues anymore. But I told one of my friends the other day, I said, I don't want to deal with this right now because I feel like this isn't the time for us to deal with it. It's kind of like when an airplane gets in a holding pattern. Eventually the plane's going to land, but it's in a holding pattern because the conditions have to be right in order for it to produce its optimal result.
Right.
And I kind of feel like that's where we are right now. Because, see, here's the thing. Whether people like it or not, what we did produced results. What we did caused people to think again. It caused preachers to preach differently. It caused preachers to be aware of the things that were being done and said about them. And as much to their chagrin as they didn't want to deal with us, they had to deal with us. And because we would put one story out and it would go viral, the next story go viral. And so it was just one of those things. And I feel like we're in a holding pattern because we really want to know, okay, where do we need to go from here in order to be the most effective? Because it really wasn't about getting people to follow us. It was because, we didn't have the biggest audience, but we wanted to be effective in what we did. And we wanted people to go ahead.
And we were very, very, very much effective with just a little bit of people. And so I always say, it's not about having an audience of thousands of people. It really isn't. Because you can do it. It's really about reaching who needs to be reached.
Right. And you want your voice to reach the people that your voice needs to reach, because you don't realize the ripple effect that it's going to cause in the lives of the people that you reach. Now, I'll give you a perfect example of what I mean. There were so many stories that came across our desk that we never even published or put out. It would get to the point sometime to where we would have to some of us would have to go away for like a month because we were so disgusted with what was coming across the desk.
Wow.
And, it would be so much that sometimes the weight of those stories would be so heavy that we couldn't even deal with it. Like, we would walk away for a month and you would see people disappear and you'd be like, well, what happened to such and such? Where are they at? It wasn't that the person, couldn't, be with us, or they couldn't be. It was the weight of what we were having to deal with. When you get stories constantly coming across your desk about preachers molesting children, and the things that were happening, it just began to overwhelm us. I mean, it really did. It just overwhelmed you. So you would have to go away for like a month or two just so that you can remain sane, so then you could come back and deal with it. So I kind of feel like, people need to understand. There was a story that broke here in the last, maybe last 6 months about a preacher. That was the last story that I happened to be working on before the church folk revolution, before we, put everything on pause. I was working on the story, and I refused to put the story out because I told the woman the only way that I would release the story is she had to give me the proof of what she was talking about. But this particular woman was in a relationship with a bishop in the Full Gospel Baptist Church, but she didn't want to release all the paperwork and the documents and the photos and the videos and everything to me. And so I refused to put out the story.
Right.
It was one of those things where if you didn't have proof, we just didn't say stuff to be saying stuff. We said stuff with proof to back up what we were talking about. And so I said I wouldn't release the story. Well, about 6 months ago, she released the proof to another vlogger, and he released the story. And I know it was her. I'm very clear about who it was. Because I had encountered this person before.
Right.
And so, that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. So we haven't really gone anywhere. we're watching and we're paying attention and we've got our ear to the ground and we're like, okay, God, what do you want us to talk about? Because see, that's the other thing. We didn't talk about everything.
Mm-hmm.
Every salacious story that came out, we didn't talk about everything. Some of these people are just, and I hate to say this, they're just messy. We didn't do this for the gossip of it. You understand
Uh-huh.
what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We did it for the conversation and to produce an end result. Some of these people do what they do because they're gossipers.
Mm-hmm.
They're salacious and they just want to gossip. That's not what we did. We didn't release the story about the lady who pastor told her he refused to bury her because she didn't pay tithes for the last couple of months. Or the people that got letters from their pastor saying you can't come here no more because you don't pay tithes consistently.
Wow.
Or that, or the story about Ivy Hilliard when he sent out a letter asking everybody to pay for his helicopter blade. We didn't produce those stories and put them out there because we wanted to be salacious or gossip about it. We wanted people to take some responsibility for the ridiculousness of some of the things that they were doing to the entire body of Christ. And saying that God spoke to you and sending out letters saying God told you that people were supposed to buy you helicopter blades. Ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we produced those stories were done, because we really cared and wanted to protect the people from, getting involved with these kind of situations. And so, that's where I'm at with it. And that's kind of how I feel about it, as far as that's concerned.
Wow. What are some of the stories you've heard in the past couple of years that you would think CFR would not have touched?
Ooh. Well, oh my God. There's so many. There's a story that recently happened between a musician and a preacher, a prophetess or whatever, um, who they were caught in a sex tape. We would have never, ever, uh, we would have never put that kind of stuff out there. We just would have never done that. There was a story on Joshua Holmes where he was in a sex tape. Now we might have discussed it, but we
Mm-hmm.
weren't going to show you the videos and have the videos posted up on a website somewhere. You understand what I mean? We would have never done that because, first of all, that's just tacky. You understand what I mean? And we're not those kind of people. We were never those kinds of people. That's tacky. I have video. Listen to me very carefully. I had, I had video of a pastor having sex with a woman in his office that we never released. We never put that out there.
I remember that. We never put out the video.
Yeah, we never released it. We would never release those kind of things. Now, will we talk about it?
Yes.
Absolutely. We would most certainly talk about those things, but we wouldn't post it on a website or tell you we're gonna put the video in a Dropbox and we'll have all y'all watching the video. No, we would have never done those things. That's tacky.
It is funny. The video with the pastor's son, that video recently, a couple of months ago, on his knees in the church for another man.
Oh no, you would have never saw it.
I don't even think y'all would have even talked about that
one. No, you would have never saw it. And I'll give you a perfect example of what I mean. When Kevin Terry, the gospel singer, was caught giving a blowjob to somebody who remained nameless and faceless, there was a show that we did on the Church Folk Revolution, and I went back the other day and listened to that show because I was talking to somebody. We were having a conversation, and I said, I think you need to go back and listen to a show that I did. It was called Believers, Bibles, and Blowjobs. That was the title of the program. And I'll never forget it because Marjorie and I did this program, and we dealt with the subject of believers, scripture quoting while getting blowjobs behind the scenes.
Oh
And we
Lord.
and we and, we dealt with that subject. There was another show that we did when Ebony Magazine had an article that they put in years ago talking about saved, single, and having sex. And the funny thing about it, we just talked about the article that was written in Ebony Magazine, but we got lambasted by people for even having the discussion that Christian people were having sex and they weren't married. And people went all out there saying, "Well, Marcellus said it was okay for you to do that." I didn't tell them people that. That is what I said. You know, but that's the way the people took it. And but those are the types of stories you would have never seen. And we definitely wouldn't have put it behind some paywall and told you you had to subscribe to the Church Folk Revolution for $9.99 a month in order for you to watch all the salacious videos. To me, that is just ridiculous. It's offensive. It really is. It's
Wow.
offensive.
Wow. Wow. Has there been any recent situations with preachers, evangelists, prophetesses, all those highfalutin folks? Has there been any stories? Like, I've been out of the loop, and I guess I don't hear anything unless it's really salacious, like what we were just talking about. But has there
Right.
been any situations that has been occurring and revealed that you think would have made it on the CFR platform?
Well, I know we would have most certainly discussed Juanita Bynum and her situation with a pastor who, she felt violated because he entered in her room and he claims that he didn't see all her undergarments. I don't believe him. There are a lot of people that do believe that the preacher just walked into her room and looked down the hall and said, "Hello, hello, is anybody in there?" And when he realized wasn't nobody in there, he just walked out. I don't believe him. And the reason why I don't believe him is because of the controlling nature of how he handled the situation from the beginning. He was the pastor who was hosting an event, who was bringing her into town, and based on his own words, he had a gift, quote unquote, that he wanted to present to Juanita, and he went to her room. He is a married man who went to the hotel of a single woman to present a gift to her. Uh, and that entire story to me, if I methodically walk through that entire story, trust me when I tell you, I don't believe him. I know he's lying, just based on the things that he said, and based on the things that she said. She lied and he lied. Both of them lied, and it's just one of those things where I think people need to really put on their thinking caps and really think about it. Juanita says when she goes into a hotel, she covers all of the furniture with white sheets. So this pastor wants us to believe that he walked into a hotel room that looked like Casper the Friendly Ghost with sheets covered over everything. And he just walked in there and said, "Hello, hello, hello," and then walked out of there. Now, most of us, if we walk into a room that's covered in white sheets, we would think that the room is not being occupied.
Right.
We would think, "Oh, this is a room that isn't being used."
Yeah.
So we would immediately turn around. But he had been told a bit, just based on some statements that I heard on another vlogger's program. He had been told that when she enters into a room, she covers everything with white sheets. So when he entered into the room, he should have already assumed and known that the room had been prepped for her when he entered into the room. And at that moment, he should have turned around and walked out. And whatever he wanted to leave her, he should have left at the front desk. Right. Why would you want to go into the girl's room to present her with a gift when she's got a staff of people that she brings, and you the pastor who's hosting the event, your wife is out of town, according to them, but the story just doesn't add up for me. According to him, his wife is out of town, so he goes. But then, when there was a problem picking Juanita up at the airport, from the get-go, this entire story is just ridiculous. And they all blame Juanita. They say Juanita's being difficult, all this kind of stuff. But I keep telling everybody, Juanita's playing the game just like everybody else playing the game. If she can get you to give her $40,000 for an honorarium, she's gonna get it. The rest of them do it. All of them do it. So don't be, acting all indifferent all of a sudden because Juanita acts, she's asking for stuff that, a different way. If you want Juanita, you got to pay Juanita's fare. Simple as that. If you want Jamal Bryant, you got to pay these people's fare. And my thing is that if you're stupid enough to keep contributing to it and they can keep making the money off of you, then that's your fault. That's your fault. And it's just that simple. But that's right now, to me, that's the most ridiculous story that's been out there. And there's a whole host of others. But, to tell you the truth, I have just, like I said, I'm being quiet and I'm waiting until God says speak. And because I really wanted to speak. I really wanted to say some things. But I have to be completely honest with you. It was like something in my spirit shut that thing down. You hear me? And I couldn't say what I wanted to say. So I just kept my mouth closed. And I'm waiting because there's a couple of things that are going on. And I think God is going to give us some voice. And because when we reemerge, we're going to talk to and through and about some of this stuff in a way that, one thing about us, when we come, you can't shut us down and you can't close our mouth. And you have to take heed to the stuff that we say. And so that's why I'm quiet about it. But, hey, that Juanita situation was very, very interesting. And by the way, and I'll say this again, and I said this on the Church Folk Revolution many times. Now, in my opinion, Juanita Bynum is a lesbian. That is my opinion.
Okay.
When her staff is all lesbians, when the woman that goes to lay out her bra is a past lesbian, allegedly, or has this lesbian history, and all the people on your staff that travel with you are lesbians, it will most certainly draw a red flag for me. And I said that years ago. I said, Juanita preaches too hard. She's too rude to men, and she don't conduct herself in a manner that is conducive for, it would be very hard for a man to love her. It would be hard for a man to love her. I'm being very honest. You can't love a woman that speaks the way she speaks. It's so hard. It's so difficult. It really is. It really is. So, yeah, that's my opinion.
Hard for a man to love her. Wow.
Oh, yeah, it'd be very difficult. There's no feminine quality about how she conducts herself. It really isn't. She could preach in all lace and you would still feel like you just had all your tires slashed and your throat slashed. You understand what I mean?
Marcellus, you a mess.
It's the honest truth. She could be wearing all lace, and you would still feel like you just had your tire slashed and your throat slashed. You're like, why is she preaching so hard? And why is she talking to us like that? It's like, my goodness. But, this is the kind of preaching and this is the kind of stuff that goes on in the institutionalized church that we've been accustomed to, and no one questions or no one says anything, and it's just crazy. It's really insane. It's insane. Why can't we talk about, the things that we talk about? And so I'll leave it there.
Of course not. Touch not my anointed. Yeah, and wasn't it?
That's the go-to scripture, but it has nothing to do with what they use it for. And it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate that too many people don't understand and don't really understand the historical context of the things that they speak.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it really is. It's really sad. You know, I've had so many preachers over the years get so upset with me when I start talking to them about the institutionalized church and how they do what they do. You know, it's an unfortunate situation. So, only thing I can say is people just really need to wake up and start really thinking for themselves. They really do.
Wow, somebody in the chat room asked, "Who is Marcellus? Will you tell them who you be, my brother?"
Well, I am someone who has worked in a lot of different ministries. You know, my last day working in a church, working for a televangelist, who's going to remain nameless for the sake of this conversation. If you just do my history, go back and listen to some of those shows, you'll definitely know who it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I've worked with a lot of ministries, a lot of churches, and we work with trying to help people free themselves and divest themselves of the vestiges of the institutionalized church, so they can live free, be free, and have the type of conversations that are necessary as it relates to the institutionalized church. So that's who I am.
Amen. So now you know. Oh man. So let's talk about your wonderful president, Donald Trump. Did you vote for him?
Did you ask me, did I vote or could I vote? What was your question?
Did you vote for Donald Trump?
No, I did not.
And why?
Donald Trump is a racist. He is a liar. He is not as rich as he claims to be. He is a prop for the evangelical white community to convince us that he alone has been crowned by God for some unknown reason. I guess to get us into further debt and to produce the racist tropes and feelings that we're feeling in our nation and the uneasiness that we're feeling. As I was saying to you before we started this conversation, in America, when you say to me white evangelical, you may as well say white racist.
Mm-hmm.
When you use the word evangelical to me at this point in time, you may as well say racist, because the things that I have seen and heard from this so-called Christian community is nothing but racism wrapped in a Christian tortilla. It is people who are unwilling to just be honest and say the things that need to be said. Franklin Graham, racist. James Dobson, racist. Paula White, racist. Now here's the interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why people don't call T.D. Jakes out on the carpet and ask him how he produced this spiritual daughter who can go around the country trying to convince the rest of us that Donald Trump was handpicked by God and he is the chosen one, because he's gotten to the point now that he can stand on the lawn of the White House and look at a camera and say he has been chosen. He is the chosen one. And the reason why he makes those kind of statements is because he's got the white evangelical community saying to him that God chose him.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't it interesting how God only chooses Republican presidents? He never chooses Democrats. It amazes me when Barack Obama, who did a lot of things that I didn't like or appreciate, but it amazed me how when Barack Obama was president, Satan had took over the country. But the moment that the Republicans got in office, all of a sudden now, God had chosen him again. It's just, the whole thought of this is ridiculous. And they use Romans chapter 12. I believe it's verse number 1. It might be Romans 13. I might be quoting it wrong. But they always use that scripture that says all powers in government that are in power, all governing authorities have been set in place by God. And I just told some people tonight over dinner If I had a late dinner, that's why I'm still up so early. I told them, if you can't use the scripture everywhere, you can't use it nowhere. And they said, well, what do you mean, Marcellus? I say, listen, you can't tell the people who are living in North Korea under the dictatorship of Kim Jong Un, who happen to be Christians, that they need to subject themselves to him because he's in authority because God placed him in. God didn't put Kim Jong Un in authority in place. Kim Jong Un and his murderous, crew put him where he's at. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
He's where he is, not because God did it. He did it because he murdered people. He murdered his brother. He murdered other people so that he could remain in power.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so I don't subject myself to that. When you start talking about that, you have to tell me that the people who were subject in Africa under apartheid should have just kept themselves quiet and reserved themselves to live under the tyranny of people in apartheid. That makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of these verses of the Bible that they use to justify certain things, it makes no sense. And these are the same scriptures that they use to justify slavery. Slaves obey your masters.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start talking like that, you get on a real slippery slope with me, and then my eyebrows get raised, and I start to look at you really funny because something there, there's some poison in the corn that you're trying to serve, and I don't subscribe to that stuff. So Donald Trump is a racist. T.D. Jakes needs to be called out on the carpet. And you notice that they haven't really propped Paula White up at no more pastors and leadership events. The last event that she had at T.D. Jakes' church, they closed her mouth so quickly because she was starting to say some old craziness, and they closed her mouth and shut her down before she got herself into any major trouble. But as far as I'm concerned, the wickedness of these people is really my concern. It's greed. It's really an enormous amount of greed, not just from the White House, but from pulpits across this country. People are greedy. Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like we're so consumptuous that nobody can get enough. Like, how many cars do you need? How many homes do you need? How much stuff do you have to have before you figure it out that all of this stuff is worthless? It ain't worth nothing. That's not what life should be about. You acquiring and obtaining a whole lot of stuff, because you can get as much stuff as you want, But what does it mean to have all this stuff? You got these rich people hanging themselves in prison, and doing all of this stuff. They can't even, under the weight of the situations that they created for themselves, they can't even survive. And you're still trying to get more and more stuff. Something's wrong here. Something's wrong here. I think God might be trying to show us something.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think something's being shown to us, and we need to take heed to it. That's all I'm saying.
You know what else is weird to me? Like, I can remember from the 80s, the early 80s, and I was just entering my teenage years. And I would always hear with every president, Ronald Reagan, he's the Antichrist, 666. Ronald Wilson Reagan, all the letters in his name add up to 666. And the next president will come, this president is the Antichrist. I've heard this about every president except for Trump. And he's doing the most devilish stuff we have ever seen in a president yet. But I have never heard anybody refer to him as the Antichrist.
You know why? I think there's several reasons for that. I think because we understand that the Antichrist is cunning. There's a level of intelligence to the Antichrist that we would never attribute to this bozo the clown. We would never attribute a grandiose amount of intelligence to him. Therefore, I don't think people would consider him to be Antichrist. We would consider him to be the Saturday morning cartoon that comes on before they get to the real cartoon. You know what I mean? He's he's the cartoon that you watch before you really get to the cartoons that you really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think people would attribute that to him. That's why. That's my opinion.
Okay. But this man, nobody attributes the label Antichrist, but he stands up and says he's the chosen one. Isn't that amazing?
Well, yeah, but I think because people are so numb to it now, they don't really give any credence to it. And plus, the evangelicals say he is the chosen one. They say God got him there. So, they're trying to convince you that a man who, sleeps with porn stars, that grabs women by the vagina, that cheats on his wife, and the list goes on and on and on, is the chosen one. And here's what's really amazing to me. And this is how I knew I had to walk away from a lot of stuff. Here's how it really did. This was the nail in the coffin for me. It really was the nail in the coffin. And I realized that a lot of Caucasian people in the country are backing him not because they really believe that he's intelligent or he has the country's best interest at heart, but it allows them to still live under the banner of the privileges that they feel like they have to fight for, to hold on to. It is their unwillingness to acknowledge and be truthful in the context of what we're dealing with in America that has made me say, okay, I see you for who you are. You're no longer hiding in the shadows. You're no longer hiding under capes and burning crosses. I can see you. You're sitting right next to me in the pew at church.
Wow.
And here's another thing. It's not just white evangelicals. It's black people who do not understand who and what they are. They're so entrenched in the religious dogma of this evangelical foolishness that they're refusing to be and tell the truth about things as well. And I can't trust them either, because there are a lot of black preachers in this country that I just do not trust.
There's far too many black preachers. When Donald Trump had all these black preachers come to the White House and sit down with him, some of them were so transparent and so obvious that they were taking advantage of this situation and supporting Donald Trump because they felt it would be a come up for them personally. So self-serving and narcissistic. And it was
But you know what happened to them? They had political intercourse with Trump, but they were left with nothing. So he had political intercourse with them, and he left them holding themselves in the bed with the sheets, and crying, realizing that they had just been screwed over, and they got nothing in return for it.
Political intercourse.
They had political intercourse. He had political intercourse with them. He used them for his purpose, right? He used them for his purpose, and then when he was done with them, he rolled out of bed and went on and did what he needed to do. That's all he did. That's it.
Please keep talking. I gotta go get some juice.
He had political intercourse with them. It's unfortunate, but I'm not surprised. And believe it or not, there are a lot of preachers who are having spiritual intercourse with their congregants every Sunday. And the same thing is happening to them Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. And nobody's saying anything. Nobody's raising their little finger saying, excuse me, Pastor, why is the money in church only flowing in one direction? Nobody ever says anything. So that's where I'm with it. So, hey, it is what it is. I hate to say it that way, but it's just how I feel when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Ooh, I'm coming. Ooh, thank you, Marcellus. Sorry. Ooh. You just have a way with words. And I have never heard that term before, and it just got me to choking. Oh, I had to
Well,
get
think
some
about
juice.
it. He had 100 black preachers come into a room. He wowed them with whatever he wowed them. He made them a bunch of promises, and then all of a sudden, they got nothing in return.
Nothing.
Now, Ben, go ahead.
No, I said I agree. Absolutely nothing. Go ahead.
Yeah, they got nothing in return. And then you got a bunch of preachers whose reputations was marred and scarred in the black community. And it really should have been an indication to us to stop trusting a lot of these people then. But, we're so slow, we can't realize what's going on, but, hey, and like I said, it is what it is. Because right then and there, we should have had questions for John Gray right then.
Mm-hmm.
When he sat next to that man, and that should have sent off a red flag, for us right then and there.
Well, what about from the standpoint that, at least for John Gray, he met with the president in a leadership role to at least attempt to bring about change that would be for the betterment of the black community. I mean, are you saying he should not have ever attended?
Well, here's my thing. When you use the word leadership role, I understand that he's leading a congregation. See, this is the thing about the black church and the black community that baffles me. Because a black preacher can preach a sermon on Sunday, we attribute certain qualities to them that they may not necessarily possess. Just because you can preach a sermon and you're over a congregation does not a leader make you.
Mm.
You're not a leader because you can do those things. Your gifts, having the ability to preach and come up with sermons, that's a gift. So your gift can put you in places and spaces that you don't necessarily, that you're not necessarily equipped to handle. So a lot of times these preachers are getting in these places and spaces because they have a gift, but they don't necessarily possess the qualities, the skills, the mentality to actually deal with the subject matters once they get into the room with the president. Because when you get into the room with the president, you have to be able to come with some type of an agenda. You have to be able to put something on the table that you can say, here, Mr. President, here is what I've come up with. Let's see if we can sit down and discuss this. No, they're all just, getting into a room and, pontificating. They're just talking about how wonderful each one of them are. And oh, I got this church and I'm over this ministry and we're over the whole state of this and that. They're not really doing anything. They're not leaders. And I think we need to stop always attributing leadership to these people because they're not leaders.
And that's true because I remember Roland Martin interviewing them, and he was asking him, well, what was your agenda? Did you have a list of things that you wanted to present to the president? And he left them all speechless.
Yeah, because they don't. You see, here's the thing. Church people know how to do church. They talk church. They have their own language. Church has its own language, its own culture. So that's why when certain things happen in the media and church people respond, the rest of the world is like, huh? They don't really understand how they respond because they respond in the language that real people are completely unfamiliar with.
Mm-hmm.
You're left baffled. Like, what? So unless you speak church, you can't really, you can't give voice or give language to the stuff that's going on. That's how I know when preachers are talking in code and certain things are being said, and you have to, be able to read between the lines. Now, with that being said, these preachers get into a room with the President of the United States. I can assure you, they're just glad to be in the room.
With the
they're
president.
Glad to be in the room. Yeah, because when you get into the room, you have an audience with the king, and when you have an audience with the king, you feel like that gives you some type of influence. Because when you go out into the marketplace, you can tell people, "Oh, I've had an audience with the king." Well, what they don't really understand is when you have an audience with the king, if let me explain something to you because I'm really into period pieces. I love period pieces. When you go into the audience, the only people that can have an audience with the king is normally the people who are in the upper echelon, and they get to exist in what's called the king's court. So when the king gets ready to have a meeting or whatever, all of the people that are in the king's court have access to the king. But what you will soon discover is that everybody who's in the king's court don't have the king's best interest at heart. And everybody who's interacting with each other in the king's court don't have each other's best interest at heart. Donald Trump don't have 100 black preachers' best interest at heart because then that would have to deal with the black people that they have to, preach to. They don't have their best interest at heart. He's been very clear about that. Black and brown people, he doesn't really care too much for. So then, what are you to assume after that? Okay, if he doesn't have my best interest at heart, then what exactly is he bringing me into the room for? So you should have to start asking yourself some really hard questions. And this is the thing. When you're having political intercourse, and in our world today, a lot of people who sleep with people, they have this vindictive mentality of, I'm going to take a picture while they're lying in the bed asleep, so I'll have proof that I was in the room with them, or they was in the room with me. So when I walk out of this room, I'll be able to say, look, I slept with such and such, or I was in the room with such and such. Well, believe it or not, that's exactly what's happening politically. All Donald Trump is using them for is a photo opportunity to say, hey, they were in the room with me, and hey, they believe in me. These 100 black preachers believe in me, so you should vote for me. What else do you have to lose? Isn't that what he told black people? He said, what else do you have to lose? Your neighborhoods are full of crime. You're all on welfare. What else do you have to lose?
You run shithole countries, quote unquote.
Exactly. So there you have it. They're all having political intercourse, and it's unfortunate, but we're the ones who are left holding nothing. We're holding on to the sheets up to our bosom with our knees folded, crying, not realizing we've just been taken advantage of, and we don't know how to get ourselves out of the situation.
Someone said he left them with a ripped $1 bill on the nightstand.
It's really true. It's really, really the truth, and that's a shame. It's really a shame, but that's what the black church will do in America today. And that's why I tell people, pay attention to these people and pay attention to who's in those rooms. I remember when they did that, I posted the names of every one of them fools that was in that room. Even the people who were hiding, who didn't want to let people know that they were in the room, I posted their names too. And then some of them told me they wasn't going to go back, like that woman in Detroit. I can't remember her name right now. But Paul Morton, at least I can say Paul Morton decided he was never going to go. Because he just decided he wasn't going to go. But yeah.
Let me ask you a question. In a meeting like that, and they all sat around this big old table, right? Do you think it was designed in terms of who would sit where? And the people who were sitting right next to Donald Trump, who were they, if you can remember? And why do you think they were chosen to be seated right there?
Well, you got to see, John Gray at the time had a huge following. He was down there with Joel Osteen. He was on the come up, and so he had a huge following. People like Daryl Scott, him and his wife Belinda Scott. And I believe it or not, I've known about Dale Scott for years and years before he ever came on the scene. Um, from way back into the Azusa days with Bishop Carlton Pearson, I've known about Dale and Belinda Scott. Actually, Carlton Pearson wrote the foreword for one of Daryl's books. I think it might have been his first book that he published. But you know, it's just one of those. It's one of those situations. I think that yes, they probably chose who sat where because influence and who sits next to the king matters. It just makes me think of a scripture. There was a time when Jesus' disciples came to him and said, "Who's going to tell me who's going to sit on your left and who's going to sit on your right?" And Jesus said, "It's not for me to give that, but that's up to my Father to give." If you remember the account, the biblical account. And because one of the mothers came and said, make sure my two boys get to sit next to you on the throne. And it's the same mentality here. He who sits next to the king, has the ear of the king. Mm-hmm. So, if you sit next to the king, you got the ear of the king. And so they're thinking, hey, if I get him in, then I'll have his ear. And they'll be able to kind of control the king the way they want to control the king. But Jesus said, it ain't up for me to give, so let's squash that. I think it was very strategic. Keep in mind, Omarosa was in that room at the time, and just saying.
Wow. Omarosa, we forgot about her. Her thing was like a flash in the pan.
And then all of a sudden now she's telling, oh, he's a racist. So when did you get that revelation, Omarosa? You just got that revelation? It's like, come on, you knew he was a racist from the beginning. So, but people love these positions of power. They love being in the media. Everybody loves this, their 15 minutes of fame, but they really are so ineffective for our community, that I'm not really interested in hearing about anybody else's agenda. If you're not talking about how you can move our people forward and you're going to help us economically move ourselves forward, I don't really have time for you.
Wow. Wow. Well, this has been a very, very interesting conversation. And I just want to thank you so much, Marcellus, for taking the time to come and go live with me and just expound on your views and in terms of how you see things and also in terms of how things really, really are. But before I let you go, I have to ask you to inform us if you do know anything about it. I briefly came across a video of the pastor who took over Eddie Long's church after he died. And he was there for like a year or two or whatever. He left and in walks Jamal Bryant. Did you see a video of this pastor laying hands on people and dropping tea on New Birth?
No, I did hear something in the wind. I heard that Eddie Long's daughter came out with a Facebook post, or she tweeted something in rebuttal to some comments that this particular pastor had made. But I heard her comments because I think somebody had read her comments to me. I don't remember verbatim what she said, but the gist of it was, my father, had done so much for you and blah, 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 blah. And how could you, turn your back on my family? My mother had done so much for you, paid you, and all this kind of stuff. And, roughly that. But let me say this again, and I've said this a million times. New Birth should have closed their doors. Mm-hmm. New Birth should have closed their doors. Outside of a lightning strike, I don't think that the people of New Birth will ever understand the trauma and damage they've done to the entire Christian community. And, to me, it shows you the rebellious nature of people who are hard-hearted and stubborn and they're so greedy that they refuse to take a step back and admit where they were wrong. Because you have to keep in mind, a lot of these same people that still go into New Birth supporting Jamal Bryant right now were still supporting Eddie Long when he was still talking about, he was on a new diet and taking vitamins and he was coming back. He don't eat slave meals anymore. These are the same people that were supporting him. And I just think that, as I said before, I think those people themselves ought to be shamed. I think because they were wicked and they ought to be ashamed of themselves. But I understand God is not mocked. Whatsoever man sows, that will he also reap. So sooner or later, you're going to see the same thing again. Because Jamal cannot keep his hand out of the cookie jar. And we all know what kind of cookies he likes. So we'll just stand back and we'll watch, because sooner or later it's going to happen all over again.
Wow. Well, how do you think he's doing so far?
Well, you got to keep in mind, these are black people dealing with their black preachers. Outside of the fact that he building the shrine inside of the church to Eddie Long, by the way, I don't know if you know that there's an actual shrine in there. They got his old suits that he preached in and robes and things, and that people can come by and look at. Which I don't understand it.
Well, that's in step with New Birth had always been a shrine to Eddie Long.
So they got a whole new shrine in there. Right now, I don't even know what to say about Jamal. Only thing I can say is I hope he gets some, wants to do something to help all of those black people in that area, and really do something to help the black community. But I'm not keeping my hopes up, if you want to know the truth. I'm really not. I don't think he gives a flying flip, really. I think most of that stuff is photo opportunities. And, and here's another thing that I want to comment on. Please, people, stop going around saying my pastor gave away money at church, or he gave away a car or something. That's automatically supposed to justify all of the tithes and offering that these people have been stealing for years and years and years. I don't care that your pastor gave away a car this weekend, or he paid somebody's rent, this weekend. You have to think about all of the Sundays and all of the weeks where that is not being done. Because if you read the scripture, the Bible says when those people came together and they dispersed, there was not one need among them. Every need amongst the people had already been met. If they found out that somebody had a need, they met it. The black church is the only place I know where you can have a need and they want to stretch forth their hand and pray for you. Don't nobody ever try to really look to meet the need, and sporadically, when the Holy Spirit supposedly takes over the congregation every now and then they get overwhelmed that, maybe we need to give these people some money and actually help them. So, I think people need to rethink, and think about this stuff, in a different way, because it's just ridiculous. It really is. It's ridiculous.
It really is. All right. So with that, we are going to wrap this up. I try to stay like within an hour, but a lot of times that just does not happen. Well, I'm definitely going to have you back on again, and perhaps I could stir up something, because I think, like you said, you've been having a pull also. Something in your spirit has been stirring, but it's been keeping you quiet. It just hasn't been time for you to speak, as you said earlier in this broadcast. And so perhaps now is the time. The synergy of the spirit is starting to work among us. And I think we're going to have to reconvene and shake things up again. What say you?
Well, I definitely think, there's something brewing. I'm just sort of being quiet. I'm trying to hear, what's on the, what needs to be said. What a lot of people don't understand too, and I want to say this: we had a deal on the table. A lot of people in Church Folk Revolution don't even know this. There was a very big media company that was looking to put us on television, but our reluctant leader, I will say, or founder, was really reluctant to do it because I think it would have exposed him in a way that he just did not want to be exposed. And I think that there will be something, and there is something that's going to come out of this. And it's when we do reconvene, it's going to catapult us in a way that is going to be unstoppable. So I think that people should just be patient, because it's best to do things in their proper time.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're done proper, the whole world will have to take heed to the things that we say and do. And to that, I'll say good night.
Mm-hmm. All right. Good night. And thank you so much, Marcellus. And
All right.
we'll be chatting again real soon. Okay, buddy?
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Peace.
All right. All right.